Hello and welcome to From the Be All End, the Burnley podcast. Well, it's Monday morning again, or Sunday night as we're recording. And despite me deciding I wasn't going to jinx this episode of the Debrief by saying I hope we're going to be talking about something positive, unfortunately, we are going to be talking about something negative again, which is another Burnley defeat. And in the kind of midst of all that, we have become, I think, the first team since football began in 1992 to lose their first 6 home games in the Premier League. So a very unwanted record, given all the records we were breaking last year. But to try and pick apart what was probably, in all honesty, the best home performance and probably the most complete performance of the season, Justin Connolly and Paul Woodhouse. Chaps, let's start with you, Justin. Frustrating. Kind of angry for different reasons coming off the turf on Saturday, weren't we?
Yeah, I was actually quite angry. I was just, I turned around to Chris as we were leaving the game. I said, I literally cannot believe what I've just seen. I mean, if you kind of take it out of the context of the run of form that we've had at home, it was just one of those games, wasn't it, where we were like massively on top, totally dominated in every department. We just couldn't get that goal. And then, as per usual, we kind of gifted them 2 goals. I mean, like I said before, I can't remember them really being in an hour half, apart from the 2 times that they scored. So it was really, really disappointing and frustrating, but at the same time also quite. I'm a little bit more optimistic. I was angry, like in the immediate aftermath of the game, that we couldn't put that one to bed because we definitely should have done. But then, as you sort of begin to process it, you sort of think, well, it certainly felt different to the kind of performances that we've seen where we haven't been in the game at all. I know perhaps the opposition wasn't quite as good as the opposition we've been used to playing, but we were in the game for the whole match. We were dominating in all areas apart from the one that really counts, and that's the real big frustration, isn't it?
Yeah, and it is that creating of quality chances, isn't it, Woody? In terms of, you look at the stats and you would think that whoever was in charge of putting the graphic together had got the score the wrong way around, and it did feel like when that first goal went in, that was their first venture over the halfway line, because we were just penning them back corners. But ultimately, it is about scoring goals, isn't it?
Exactly. They were supremely clinical, and we were supremely wasteful, and that's the story of it, isn't it? I think for me, it felt like almost like a complete performance from the Championship last year. However, the difference being that you would have expected against Rotherham, etc., we'd have run out winning 2-1, having scored a couple in the last 5. But there was no, obviously, such a turnaround against Crystal Palace, and that's how brutal it was, really. That we've huffed and puffed, and I thought we huffed and puffed very well. We didn't just have that 15 to 20 minutes and then it all fall by the wayside. We carried on. We weren't quite as passive. There was still a little bit of passivity going into the second half, but even towards the end of the second half, we did feel to up the ante again, and we put a shift in. And so I think we were quite happy to see that. But yeah, we're going to struggle if we can't even create the chances, never mind put them away. And so, yeah, it was a double-edged sword coin type thing, wasn't it?
We'd asked for commitment. We'd asked for a bit of bite. We'd asked for a bit of urgency, and we kind of got a bit of all that. But that urgency perhaps needed turning up another notch. I mean, I've just watched Luton versus Liverpool, and that is almost the kind of perfect way to play as a promoted club. You know, there seems to be a bit of fear within us at the minute. We're kind of like, you know, I described it as tippy twatty before we came on air, but it is that kind of doing too much when actually you just need to be more clinical. And like Woody said, you know, there's positives, isn't there? There's kind of, you said you were a bit more optimistic. It's becoming clear that it's probably a 4-team mini league, us, Luton, Sheffield United and Bournemouth. Are we good enough based on Saturday's performance, if we can get consistency, to come out on top of them 4?
I think so. I mean, like I said, it did feel to me like there was a different sort of sense to the way we were playing. I agree with you that there was a bit more intensity there, but there was a certain lack of urgency in that second half when we were only 1-0 down. We should have been putting them to the sword there. We should have been really, because we dominated possession so much. We had so many, you know, fairly decent chances. You know, Goodmanson, you know, had a decent opportunity that perhaps a more clinical finisher might have put away. J-Rod had that header, which was, you know, it was a decent save. You know, I think we had 17 shots at goal, which is probably more than we've had in all the other games at home put together. And the changes that were forced on us, I think without Cullen there, we kind of played a midfield diamond, didn't we? It's a different formation to what we normally play. Like Berger was sort of sat at the base of it, and Brownhill up top. I think that's probably the wrong way around. I think Berger's getting better with every single game that he plays and showing a lot of drive. He was the one when he got the ball and he started driving forward with it and bringing the wide players into it. He was the one who was really upping the tempo a little bit. Aside from him, there was a lot of sort of tapping it around across the line, out on the edge of the box. And you know, when you've literally got 10 players to try and thread it through, and they're all in the 18-yard box, it makes it very difficult, doesn't it? We did a lot better when we got it out wide, particularly to Koleosho. Obviously, he's you know, he scares the life out of him. Still not really 100% producing. You know, he needs to get some more assists under his belt, and I think he should be scoring some goals given his pace and how he can go past people. Are we good enough to get? I mean, I think we need to start getting some points on the board, obviously, because I've said before that we don't want to get adrift of the pack, and that's sort of not quite happening yet, because there's, like you said, there's 4 of us down there. We're only 1 win away from getting out of the bottom 3, but it's a long way up to Everton now. I think they're about 7 points ahead of us, which is, you know, that's 3 games, isn't it? And if that gap starts getting wider, then we could be in some serious trouble. We need to start before. You still need to be in touch at Christmas, don't you? Hopefully, reinforcements arrive in January and we improve. On the evidence of Saturday, I would say yes, we've got what it takes to pick up points against these sides. Whether we've already forfeited too many of those points to these sides that we should be beating, I'm not sure. But improvement, yes. But like we keep saying every week, don't we? We need to start seeing some points.
Yeah, and Woody, I mean, Justin talked about being in touch at Christmas. You know, again, don't want to keep harking back to the European season and us going into that, you know, coming out of the Everton game on Boxing Day with only 12 points. But he's right, isn't he? Whilst we are still in touch, and Forest have beaten Villa this weekend, which pushes them beyond us. You know, they were already quite a bit beyond us, and it's pushed us further. There were positives, and you just feel that, I don't know, if we stop chopping and changing, you know, you'd almost like to see that lineup, if fit, continue to kind of build, because we talked on Friday's podcast about building relationships between fullbacks and wingers. There is signs there that this lineup and this system that he chose could keep us in touch at Christmas and then be added to in January to then kind of go on the kind of run we need to pull us clear, isn't there?
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that, and I think I'm always a bit loath to use the word luck and what have you, but I think we have been slightly unfortunate with how we've obviously had, red cards at the wrong time, we've had injuries at the wrong time to key players, etc. And if we can just align some of that and get Ekdal and Bear both fit, both playing again, a little bit of a run, and like you say, if we can get a little bit of a run going in terms of the side as a whole, and see yesterday as more of a lower benchmark as to how we should perform, then I think I'm not going to say we're going to be all right, but I think we're going to, at least compete, because there are going to be at least those 4 teams are going to be there and thereabouts at Christmas. Somebody else will get dragged into it like they always do every year, And I think, fingers crossed, should things start going the right way, and we sign the players that we all spoke about signing during the summer, then I think we've got a chance. But if it carries on the way it has done, then we're just going to find ourselves cast adrift, and we'll be talking about this ad infinitum for God knows how long.
And we mentioned, Woody mentioned Bayer there and Ekdal. We know Ekdal came through an hour on Saturday for the under-21s, which is, as good a sign as we've seen. Also, Obafemi and a few others there in terms of returning to fitness, Darko Cherlinov, people like that. So there are options coming back. But just on Bayer, I mean, he obviously gave away the error for that first goal. He looked gutted, didn't he? I mean, you could see. I don't know if you could see it on TV, Woody, where you were, but he was literally just kind of, he was distraught. But the promising thing is that we didn't collapse and suddenly concede a second straight after, and B, he didn't really let it affect him, did he? I mean, I think O'Shea or somebody went over to him, slapped him on the back and said, "Look, come on." He's come out on Instagram and said, "Look, that's all on me. I apologise, completely my cock up." It goes back to that decision making though, doesn't it? Because all he needs to do, and we saw him do it in the Championship, is just stick it in the stand. Stick it in the stand, retreat. But he's kind of got his feet in a mess. He's not played for a while, obviously. But it was that back four for me looked a lot better with Bear in there, didn't it? It felt like it had a structure. That the second goal we'll talk about in a minute, but that was quite pleasing. And Woody, I agree with Woody. I hate talking about luck, but it does feel like we've got one of us who we think is going to be the first choice centre halves back. We think Ekdal might be the second. It just felt a lot more secure, didn't it? And again, dare I say it, without Cullen, it felt a little bit less cumbersome in that midfield.
Yeah, definitely did. I thought seeing Bayer on the team sheet must have been a real sort of boost for the whole team. I don't know. Alderkill wasn't even on the bench, was he? I don't know whether he was injured or whether he's just been taken out of the firing line, as we sort of suggested last week. He might need just to regroup himself a little bit because he's looking a bit nervy. I think obviously it's a mistake. It's a mistake that they punished really well. They took that goal really well, didn't they? It wasn't a given that, there was still some work to do after he got the ball off Bayer. And it was a great finish. But those are the kind of things that are going to happen when you play the way that we play, with knocking the ball around at the back and trying to find openings, building from your centre backs. He could have smacked it into the stand, of course, but you don't know. He's probably been told, we don't do that. We try and keep the ball as best we can. Yeah. And I think there was something about the solidity and the compactness of the midfield when we had the ball that allowed the fullbacks to get a little bit further forward. Vitinho was more or less playing like a right winger for much of the game, with Goodmanson coming inside a little bit. It just seemed so much more solid, and there was so much more protection for that centre back pairing. And we just got the ball forward more. But I think it was what we said it before, didn't we? In the preview game, we kind of seem it feels a little bit like we're stumbling around trying to hit upon a combination that's going to work, and that the combination that we arrived at for Saturday's game, almost by chance, because Cullen would have been in the starting lineup, no doubt, if he hadn't been suspended. Almost by chance, we've seem to have hit upon something that kind of seemed to work. Whether that's to do with Bayer being back and organising everybody a little bit better, or whether it's that midfield diamond that he played that allowed us to have that sort of compact, system in the centre there. I don't think Cullen gets straight back into the side after that game. He wouldn't do for me anyway. I imagine that company might think differently about that. But I think you're right, Greasy. I think we've got something to build on there, something that, they should come away from that game without the confidence being dented. They should come away from that game with the confidence growing a little bit, because, they've played a side who I think, I'm not sure how many points Palace have got, but they're certainly, is it 12 maybe? They're in that pack above us anyway, aren't they? They're sort of, they will be quite happy with the number of points that they've amassed. And we've totally blown them away in all departments apart from the one that counts. So confidence should be coming from that. And if we can start building those partnerships that we talk about, if we can start getting a little bit of consistency with how we play and a bit of identity and a bit of a way of playing, I think that's what we need now more than anything else. We don't want to be chopping and changing again. We don't want to be making selections out of left field to try and confuse people, which seems to be the policy. We just need to build on what we did on Saturday and add a little bit more aggression, a little bit more urgency, and we need that clinical finisher.
Yeah.
And I think it's also worth. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, that chopping and changing is kind of what's killed us, isn't it? And some of it's been forced with injuries, but, you almost just want somebody just to kind of, lock Vincent in a room for the next 7 days and just kind of playing that video on loop to show him the kind of potential that team has. Yeah. I agree with Justin. I half think he'll bring Cullen back in because he does, he does appear to have his favourites and he's trusted lieutenant. But, there is something you can hang your hat on. It felt a bit more like an identity, didn't it, on Saturday?
Yeah, but I do also think we've got to be a little bit careful with how we approach this, as whether it was Burnley imposing themselves on the game on Saturday or the fact that Palace just didn't come to play. Very rarely do you see a side turn up and do as little as they actually did on Saturday. It was quite bizarre how they just stood off us and let us do whatever. So there was, they weren't really mixing and matching it anywhere, were they? Apart from maybe that first goal when they, nudged Bear off the ball, etc. But the rest of it was staggeringly passive. So I'd like to see how this translates into a little bit more of a competitive afternoon, and then we can talk about that.
Yeah, and of course we've got an easy trip to Arsenal next week, Justin, haven't we? I know. It's the one game, you want a competitive game where they don't come much more competitive. I mean, they obviously have it's all kicked off at Arsenal with, Arteta being unhappy. I mean, he's always unhappy, isn't he? I mean, he was whinging about the length of the bloody grass at Turf Moor a couple of years ago. I think he's got a bit of a point with the VAR goal yesterday at Newcastle, I have to say. But I mean, they look a good side, unbeaten until yesterday. We keep talking more in hope than expectation of us getting one of our famous giant killing wins that we always get in the Premier League. You just don't see us really, do you? Getting anything at the Emirates? I know when we had Joe on last week, he was talking about you beat Palace and suddenly you get a point at the Emirates. We didn't beat Palace. Could we get anything at the Emirates?
Yeah, well, it seems highly unlikely, doesn't it? They're a great side. They're going to be challenging for the title this season again, aren't they? And they've got some fabulous players, and we're away from home. It seemed, I hate saying this, but it's like another one of those free hits that we have, isn't it? Where we can just sort of go and play, where nobody's expecting us to do anything. Everybody is expecting us to lose heavily. Maybe a little bit of confidence from Saturday's performance carries over, and with a bit I always say this, you don't know what's going to happen. That's why we actually have to go and play the games. If we decided what the league position at the end of the season was based on what we think is going to happen, then there'd be no point in playing, would there? So you never say never. There's always a chance. It seems unlikely given our sort of form at the moment, but we've played. All the points we've got have been on the road, albeit at teams that aren't quite of the stature of Arsenal. But never say never. And if we can carry some of the form that we showed on Saturday through into that game, then there's always a chance. Until we give away a goal in the first 5 minutes, there's always a chance.
Woody, I thought Justin there was as he was pouring himself another glass of wine was going to be completely pessimistic, but quite optimistic. I mean, you've been the optimistic one over the last couple of podcasts. Can you see us getting anything at Arsenal?
Don't be daft. But yeah, I mean, yes, no, I've genuinely no idea. Genuinely no idea. I think we'll probably do exactly the same as we have done every single game so far. Koleos will scare the living bejesus out of somebody for 20 minutes. Then they'll go and score. Then we'll huff and puff for a little bit, and then we'll lose 3 or 4-1. And that's what you put your money on. However, there's always something that can happen. There's always something weird that can happen. And like you say, if we can actually start looking, take these performances and keep at it, build on it, like we said, get a little bit more of the rub of the green in our direction, then we'll start. There's a very good chance that we'll start picking something up with regards to that. But it would be very nice sooner rather than later for them to be able to put a marker down and put a performance in against the likes of an Arsenal where they can at least come off and at least see something, some kind of reward for what they've put in of an afternoon. I think that will work absolute wonders for everybody concerned. I'm not overly hopeful. Not overly hopeful.
No.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess we've also got, we got an international break. I think it's the third international break of the season already. After that, we've then got West Ham at home, which of course is our first flag game. So we've got the 200 free flags going to be creating that atmosphere we've been craving. Let's just kind of address at the end. There were a few boos at the end of the game. It felt a bit weird because it was kind of after all of the performances where you perhaps would expect us to boo. I mean, we've talked a couple of times about unacceptable second half, Justin. It felt slightly weird hearing some boos at the final whistle on Saturday, didn't it? I mean, the atmosphere I thought was pretty good throughout.
Yeah, I thought it was great throughout. I thought to myself, there's no need for a drummer. There's no need for any flags here. They got right behind the team. There was plenty of noise, plenty of atmosphere. I think the boos at half time were a little bit reflective of the fact that we just conceded that second goal. I'm write that off. I mean, that wasn't a 2-0 defeat. That last goal was more or less the last kick of the game, wasn't it? The second goal, and he'd sort of taken Bear off, hadn't he? And he brought Mike Trezor on for the last few minutes. So he just rolled the dice there to try and get an equaliser in that last bit of injury time. So I don't count that last goal. It was just a 1-0 defeat for me, that game. So I think because that goal came so close to the end, there was a bit of a mass exodus actually when that goal went in. A lot of people, when the final whistle went, I looked around the ground, it was already pretty empty, and I thought, I was a bit disappointed at that because I thought they deserved better after that performance. I thought it was a performance that should have been rewarded with a little bit more respect from the fans. I think because to my mind, it was different. It was better. The net result was the same, but like I said, taken out of context of the run of form, I think there would have been more sympathy for the players rather than, anger. I sort of think the anger might have been directed more at the manager than the players, because I think the players did put a shift in. I think we're just a bit sick and tired of getting drubbed at home, aren't we? And that sort of eventually is always going to boil over to people being upset about it. But that was a bit disappointing. I thought the atmosphere was good enough. They gave us something to work with. There was a little bit of frustration at the lack of urgency, and a little bit of frustration at the fact that we didn't really go for the jugular when we could have done. There was just a lot of tippy tapping about. But it was a bit unfair, I think, to boo them at the end. I certainly wasn't doing that, and I think I don't think it helps. I don't think the players won't be going off the pitch thinking, yeah, we deserve that. The players were going, we gave everything there, and we played quite well, and it's a shame. But I hope that doesn't affect the confidence, because going forward, they're going to need to keep that confidence intact and build on it.
Definitely. I mean, there were some positives. I was a bit. I always go on up the Clarets message board to look at the player ratings, and quite a lot of low scores from from some people. But Woody, overall, very few players actually put a foot wrong, and I say that in the context of there's obviously an error from Bayer for the first goal and an error from O'Shea, for the goal Justin's not counting. So I'll add that to the fact that we won at Forest and we're a lot better off than we actually think we are. But individually, the players all kind of did their job, didn't they? There was, Vitinho, I actually thought probably had one of his better games, shall we say, filling in at right back again, so kept his place and looked to try and get forward. Brownhill, apart from his abysmal set pieces, which we need to find an answer for, had that energy that we look for, kind of came in and out of the game perhaps, but Taylor looked decent. I think O'Shea probably had one of his better games because he was allowed to just do the defending stuff when asked upon. Trafford really had very little to do, possible red card offence for the challenge on him. Looking at the replay, if you're a big club, you kind of get them, and that again perhaps changes the game slightly. But individually, there's very few players you could dig out on that performance, is there, Woody?
Totally agree with you 100%. And as Justin was saying, and as Vincent said in his press conference afterwards, he wasn't counting the second goal either. That was a 1-0 mistake. It should have, arguably it should have been zip. But I thought that was one of the better games we've seen with O'Shea. Maybe he does perform better with a better centre half with him in a pairing. Maybe that's the kind of a centre half that he is. But I think, across the board, really, there was nobody that you could really single out as having an absolute shit out by any stretch. I mean, J-Rod's legs are looking older than we might have anticipated. But other than that, I thought Amadune and Koleosho both had two very good games, and I think Koleosho is improving week on week. He's contributing more. Yes, everybody says everything about his end product and all that kind of business, and maybe he wants to look at that first goal as to what to do with a breakaway. Have a look, slide rule pass. There you go. Don't just whack it into the middle for no apparent reason and hope it balloons off somebody. There was a method to their madness with that first goal. And I think just understanding how to be a little bit more clinical and better decision making, and that'll come. But I thought, to a man, pretty much, we're not saying there were any 8 out of 10s, maybe not so many 7 out of 10s, but there was some strong 6.5 out of 10 across the board. I thought they were solid as a unit yesterday, and fair play to them.
I'd completely agree with that. I would also say that I think for many years under Sean Dyche, Johan Gudmundsson has been as the player that's had the most quality, and I think he's still showing that now. I think when he's in the side, we've got. You say, I mean, I agree with you about Brownhill's set pieces. Very rarely do his corners get beyond the first man, and I just think Gudmundsson has got that delivery that just gives you that little bit of an edge, and he brings so much more quality into that midfield when he gets on the ball. So I'd like to see him on more set pieces. And I think Sander Berge is also growing in stature with every game. He's becoming more influential in games. He's becoming more influential in the within the context of the team. But I would like to see him playing further up the pitch. I know he's a big man. He's a, as Chris described him as we were watching the game, he's a real unit. But he's got the quality, hasn't he? And I think he's much more effective when he's playing in that in that top end of the pitch. So I'd like to see him. I don't want too many changes from that team. I'd like to see him given the chance to play against Arsenal. And as far as Trafford goes, he doesn't seem confident to me. And the distribution was laboured and slow. There were, having been to Goodison on Wednesday night and seeing Muric pinging it about from the back without any sort of hesitation with the quality that he's got, it just seems like the sort of pace and the urgency that we move forward with. When Trafford is in goal, he's playing short passes out to the centre halves, who are then passing it out to the wide players, who are then. With Muric in goal, it pings straight out to the wide players, and they've just got that little bit of extra time before they get closed down to move it on forward. It just seems like that pace and that sort of the speed of movement up the pitch is much faster when you've got a keeper who can do that. And I think that's the only thing that I would say is missing. Also, I don't know what you guys think, but we had 5 wingers on the bench, and every single one of them got on the pitch apart from Anas Zaruri. I'm still totally baffled by that. Totally baffled by the fact that he's not getting a kick.
Yeah, I mean, we were discussing that in the stand in terms of 2 things with the substitutes, really. 3 things. One, I think they came about 10 minutes too late, and we made the wrong substitutions. I think Kolyosha and Amdouni were just getting a little bit of joy down that left-hand side, that kind of interchange and getting to the byline. And Kolyosha did really well. You talked about kind of just smashing it in, which he's been prone to. But the cut back for Goodmanson was really measured and it looked good and things like that. No Jack Cork on the bench. And when Sander Berge was limping, you kind of thought, oh, shit, we've no centre mid on the bench. And Zaruri not getting on. Would he, I know we can't read too much into, Vincent's way of doing things because, he baffles us pretty much every game with his selections. But it does feel weird that a player who was so instrumental last year, albeit slightly quieter after the World Cup, is really struggling to get a foothold apart from against the likes of Salford when he was superb and set up all 4 goals.
Exactly. But it was Salford, wasn't it? I mean, like we don't know week in, week out. We don't know, for example, whether the Corks, etc., whether they were injured, were left out, whatever was going on. But it always seems there's always something which seems to raise a little bit of a question mark in every single selection. And then again, like as we progress through the game, the substitutions sometimes a little bit off, like you were saying. It felt 10, 15 minutes too late, which this season seems to have been summed up by 10, 15, 20 minutes too late, and the second half's gone. And I don't know, I would like a lot more proactive consideration from Vincent in some of this. I think it's time that he started impressing himself on games a little bit more than he has been doing in terms of game management. But yeah, Zaruri, no idea what that's about. Maybe I genuinely don't know. But like you say, he wasn't quite the same player after he came back to the World Cup, whatever that was due to. And maybe that red card, maybe he would have played more apart from that. I don't know. Maybe it's Kolyosha. You can't begrudge Kolyosha starting down the left-hand side, having that berth. But I don't necessarily know what's going on there, really.
Yeah, I forgot the other player who played in the under-21s. Of course, is somebody we've been crying out for. Manuel Benson also got 60 minutes. So him, Ekdal, Michael Obafemi and Manuel Benson all got 50 minutes. Egan Riley and Darko Cherlinov completed the full 90, I think. So, would he talk right at the start about, not wanting to talk about luck, but having kind of unfortunate run with injuries? It's good to see Benson also getting back, because I think, again, he is that player who we expected to make that step up and things like that. But let's leave it there, because I don't think anyone needs to be any more depressed on a Monday morning commute to work. Let's be honest. We've tried to be as positive as we can. We've picked out lots of positives. We're a bit more hopeful despite the defeat. We have got Arsenal next weekend. We'll be back on Friday with a preview of that, and I'm sure we'll be chatting about what kind of PR own goal the club, the club do this time. We'll all have to buy his own cushions or something to sit on cold seats, so we won't be true fans. There'll be something, we know there will be. But until Friday, don't forget to follow, rate, like, share, etc., etc. Follow us on social media at BO Podcast. And do ask us any questions. We might get into another kind of reader mailbag on this week's episode as well, if we can't find anything else to be positive about. But until then, enjoy the week, and we'll see you soon up the Clarets.
Jimmy McElroy to Watson. Go.